And now we're going to do Ajax. So remarkably, we haven't actually had to use lifecycle methods yet, which is crazy because they're actually fairly common when you're writing React, but we have not actually had to use them yet. So we're going to introduce something now so that you can see what these lifecycle methods are. So going back to our code, let's look at something like show card. It's a pretty simple one. Now let's look at search. So you have to think of the life cycle of a component as it like lives on the DOM, right? The first thing that happens to it is it calls its constructor, inevitably that's how ES6 classes work, right? Then after that, it's going to get its own default props. And then right before it gets mounted to the DOM, it's going to call a method called component will mount. So actually what I would do here is I think it goes here. So it's component will mount. You don't have to copy this, I'm just going to show you. So this here is a method that's specific to React that this is going to get called right before React renders it out to the DOM, right? So it's called render for the first time already. So it actually has the first amount of markup, and then it's about to be mounted to the DOM. It's going to call this component will mount method. And to be honest with you, you're not going to use component will mount very much, but one of the things that it is useful for and is important is if you have something that needs to happen both on the server side, if you're doing server-side rendering, and the client side. So that's the key about component will mount, is it does get called on the server. The one that you're going to end up using more is component did mount, right? So this is going to get called after it's been rendered out to the DOM for the very first time. Now what's peculiar and good about component did mount is you can be guaranteed that window is available at this point, right? Because it's already been rendered and it's not going to get called in node, right? So anything that you want to do with the window or anything you want to do with like doing Ajax requests are going to go in component did mount. Thus, you're going to use component did mount quite a bit. A good example, so besides Ajax and beside anything that references window or document, another good thing that you're going to do in Windows component did mount is if you need to integrate with another library. So an example that would be D3, right? Say you have a React component that renders out like a chart with D3. You would do all that stuff here in component did mount to do that integration level with it. If you need to add any like event listeners on the window, that's when you would do this as well. So yes, we're going to be using component did mount quite a bit. There's a couple other of them. I have them documented out here in my notes if you want to go and read them, and they're also really well documented in the React documentation. There's component will receive props. That's going to get called every time that you're going to get brand new props from a parent. There's should component update, which we actually will use later. It's a performance optimization method, which typically you don't have to worry about. React is plenty performant by itself, but sometimes you have performance problems, and this is kind of the escape hatch for that. And then the last one is component will unmount. Like that, I think. This is before the component is about to leave the DOM. And typically this is going to be where you clean up, right? If you added any event listeners, if you need to like detach from D3 or anything like that, all that kind of cleanup stuff will happen here. Again, not something that you're typically going to need to do, but it's available there for you should you need it. And that's really it. So it's just a bunch of hooks that you can hook into the life cycle of these components to kind of do different things depending on what you need to do.